The senator's hand lingered too long on hers as they slipped out of the candlelit restaurant, a gesture so subtle the cameras across the street almost missed it. Almost. In that instant, with the faint click of a shutter hidden behind a newspaper, a career decades in the making began to unravel. Senator Daniel Reeves was a man who had built his public image brick by brick, layer upon layer of polished speeches, careful appearances, and an ironclad family brand. At 52, with flecks of silver in his hair and the warm baritone of a trusted statesman, he had the kind of presence that commanded respect even before he opened his mouth. For years he had stood on the Senate floor thundering about ethics reform, corruption, and accountability. He was the family man in campaign ads, the father tossing a football with his son on the White House lawn, the husband brushing his wife's hand with a smile during interviews. His life was a story he'd rehearsed so many times it had become second nature. But the story was a lie. Across from him in the back of the town car sat Clara Vaughn, 34, sharp, beautiful in a way that could cut glass. The lobbyist from Apex Technologies had been circling his orbit for years, tenacious in hearings, magnetic in conversation, dangerous in ambition. Daniel had told himself 1,000 times that he wouldn't give in, that he couldn't risk it, not with everything he had built. And yet, every time Clara leaned closer, every time her eyes locked on his with that daring spark, he felt the walls of his self-discipline weaken. Tonight, after weeks of whispered meetings, late-night calls, and chance encounters, the line had been crossed. Dinner had stretched into wine, laughter into touches, and when her hand slipped into his beneath the white tablecloth, he hadn't pulled away. By the time they left, he wasn't thinking of his wife waiting at home or his staff drafting tomorrow's talking points. He was thinking of Clara, of the danger, of how alive he felt stepping into the fire. The car rolled to a stop at a discreet Georgetown hotel. His pulse quickened as he adjusted his tie, nerves tangled with desire. Clara brushed her hair over one shoulder, her perfume drifting toward him like smoke. "You're sure?" she asked softly, though her smirk said she already knew the answer. He hesitated, only for a breath, and then nodded. What neither of them noticed was the man parked across the street in a rusted sedan, camera lens trained on the entrance, finger already snapping shots as the senator escorted the lobbyist through the glass doors. Each flash of the shutter was invisible in the dark, but the images burned themselves into evidence. Grainy, imperfect, but damning. Later, as Daniel leaned against the window of the hotel suite, whiskey in hand, Clara tracing lazy circles across his bare chest, the weight of it settled in. He had crossed the line, and there was no going back. For a moment, guilt gnawed at him. Then Clara kissed him again, and he drowned it in the heat of her lips, convincing himself he still had control. But somewhere, someone else already had it. Daniel Reeves never checked his private phone during committee hearings. It was an unspoken rule he held onto with religious discipline. His aides handled calls, filtered emails, and ran interference so that he could sit in the Senate chamber with his mind sharpened for debate. But that morning, while a junior senator droned through a prepared statement about agricultural subsidies, the phone in Daniel's pocket buzzed once. Just once. A single vibration. He told himself to ignore it. He'd been ignoring everything lately. His wife's pointed silences at breakfast, his daughter's worried texts, the gnawing unease in his own chest every time Clara's name flashed across his screen. Still, his hand moved. A flicker of curiosity, of dread. He slid the phone out under the polished oak desk, keeping his eyes fixed on the chamber floor as though nothing were amiss. The message had no sender name, no number he recognized. Just one line of text. "Does your wife know where you spent last night?" Attached was a photograph. Grainy, slightly blurred, but unmistakable. Daniel. Stepping into the hotel. Clara beside him, her hand brushing his arm. His blood went cold. For a long moment, he couldn't breathe. The walls of the chamber seemed to close in on him, the droning voices fading to static. He imagined the photograph splashed across newspapers, magnified on 24-hour news cycles, dissected by smug anchors on evening talk shows. He imagined Margaret's face when she saw it. No denial, no wriggle room. Just the truth. Ugly and unavoidable. His finger hovered over the delete button. But another buzz stopped him. A second message. 1 vote. That's all. Help Apex Tech push the subsidy bill through next week's committee. Do this, and the photos never see daylight. Daniel's stomach lurched. Apex Tech Clara's company. His pulse thundered in his ears. He forced himself to sit still, to breathe evenly, to look outwardly calm. Around him, senators scribbled notes, shuffled papers. No one saw his hand tremble as he slipped the phone back into his pocket. By the time the gavel struck and the chamber adjourned, his suit was damp with sweat. Clara met him 2 hours later in her glass-walled office on K Street, the city's cathedral of influence. She stood with her back to him, pouring 2 glasses of wine, though it was barely noon, her silhouette sharp against the skyline. "You look like hell," she said without turning. Daniel tossed the phone onto her desk. "Look at this." She glanced at the screen, studied the photograph, then the message beneath it. Her lips curved, not in shock, but in something closer to amusement. "Well," she murmured, handing him the wine, "we always knew this day might come." He stared at her, incredulous. "You're not worried?" "Worried?" Clara sank into her chair, crossing her legs with calculated grace. "Darling, this is Washington. Secrets are currency. The only thing that surprises me is how quickly someone decided to spend hours." Daniel gripped the glass but didn't drink. "They want me to sell my vote. On your bill." Her eyes flicked up, unreadable. "Then we'll handle it." "There is no handling it. If I fold on this, I'm finished. The Ethics Committee, my whole career." Clara leaned forward, her voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. "Listen to me. 1 vote is nothing. Do this, and it all goes away. You keep your career. Your wife never finds out. The world goes back to normal." He searched her face, looking for the woman who had captivated him, who made him feel alive in a way Margaret hadn't in years. But what he saw now was steel, calculation, ambition. And yet, her logic wrapped around him like silk. Maybe she was right. Maybe it was just 1 vote, 1 small compromise to keep everything else intact. His phone buzzed again. Another message. "Midnight tonight. Parking garage, 3rd and D. Come alone." Daniel's hand tightened around the glass until he feared it would shatter. Daniel Reeves sat at his desk, the heavy oak surface scattered with briefing notes he hadn't read, coffee he hadn't touched, and a phone he couldn't stop staring at. Midnight. Parking garage. Come alone. The words looped in his mind like a threat he couldn't shut off. Every instinct screamed to involve someone. His chief of staff, the Capitol Police, even the FBI. But the photograph burned in his thoughts, an unholy trump card. 1 leak, 1 whisper, and his name would be destroyed before he could open his mouth to defend himself. His office door opened without a knock. Clara walked in as though she owned the place, a sleek folder under her arm and that knowing look on her face. "You didn't tell them, did you?" she asked. Daniel blinked. "Tell who?" "Anyone." About the message, she tossed the folder onto his desk, then perched on the edge with feline ease. "Because if you did, and if word gets out before we get ahead of this, well, then it's out of both our hands." Daniel bristled. "So what? You think I'm going to roll over and do whatever they say?" "They're blackmailing me, Clara. Us." She smiled faintly. "Darling, this is politics. Everyone is blackmailed by someone. The trick isn't to resist. It's to choose your chains wisely." The words unsettled him more than the threat itself. "And you already have your chains picked out for me, don't you?" Clara leaned close, lowering her voice until he could feel her breath against his ear. "If you push that vote through, Apex wins. You win. I win. And whoever's dangling that photograph will find they've got nothing left to squeeze from you. It's 1 move, 1 sacrifice." He wanted to believe her. God, he wanted to. Her confidence was intoxicating, like stepping into a storm and finding yourself shielded. But the gnawing doubt inside him whispered something else. What if she wasn't just his lover caught in the crossfire? What if she was part of the fire itself? Before he could answer, his office line rang. He snatched it up. grateful for the interruption. "Senator Reeves?" It was his wife's voice. Steady. Too steady. "You're late for dinner again." He closed his eyes. "Margaret, Don't," she said. "Just don't. We'll talk when you get home." She hung up before he could reply. The silence afterward was suffocating. Clara tilted her head, studying him. "She suspects. She always suspects," he muttered, more to himself than to her. Clara reached out, brushing his sleeve with her fingertips. "Then give her no proof. That's all this is. Survival." His phone buzzed again on the desk, vibrating against the wood like a living thing. Another message. This time not just a location or demand, but a deadline. "Midnight. Don't be late, or everyone learns the truth." Daniel picked it up, his hand trembling, and for the first time he saw the abyss beneath him. No good choices, only worse ones. And the unsettling realization that Clara might be nudging him closer to the edge. The parking garage meeting had been worse than Daniel imagined. A shadowed figure, Ethan Mercer, though Daniel hadn't known his name yet, had stood across from him, smug in the flickering light, delivering threats with the ease of a man who knew he already owned his prey. "One vote," Ethan had said. "That's all. Prove you can play ball, and maybe the rest stays buried." Daniel hadn't slept since. His hands still shook when he thought of Ethan's grin, the confidence of someone holding a noose. Now, 48 hours later, the sharks were circling. "Senator Reeves, care to comment on rumors about a conflict of interest with Apex Technologies?" "Senator, will you be voting on the subsidy bill despite personal connections?" The questions came rapid fire as he pushed through the gauntlet of reporters outside the Capitol. Cameras flashed, microphones jutted into his path. His aides tried to shield him, but the wall of press was relentless. Each word they shouted seemed sharper than the last. Daniel kept his face neutral, the way he'd trained himself over decades of public life. Smile faintly. Say nothing. Keep walking. Inside, his stomach was lead. By the time he reached his office, sweat dampened the collar of his shirt. His communications director, a wiry woman named Jenna, was already waiting. Her eyes were hard. "Senator, what the hell is going on?" "The press is running wild with Apex rumors. Did you leak something? Did they?" "I didn't leak anything." His voice was hoarse, defensive. "It's speculation." Jenna folded her arms. "Speculation doesn't spread this fast without fuel. Someone's feeding them." Daniel thought of Ethan in the garage, the glint in his eyes, of Clara, calm and collected, pouring wine as though nothing could touch her. He swallowed. "Handle it. Issue a statement. Generic. Firm. No comment on rumors. No acknowledgement of specifics. Just shut it down." Jenna didn't look convinced, but she nodded and left, already dialing her phone. At home that night, Margaret waited at the kitchen island, a glass of red wine in front of her, untouched. She didn't look up when Daniel came in. "You've been on the news," she said flatly. He dropped his briefcase by the door. "It's nothing. Just noise." Her eyes finally met his, cold and sharp. "Is it?" Daniel felt the weight of the photograph in his pocket, the secret that pulsed like a live wire between them. He opened his mouth, thought about telling her everything, about Ethan, about Clara, about the blackmail that was crushing him. But the words caught in his throat. Instead, he said, "Yes. It's nothing." Margaret laughed once, bitter and humorless. "You used to be a good liar, Daniel." "You're slipping." She stood, wineglass still full, and walked upstairs without another word. The next morning, Clara breezed into his office with a copy of the Washington Post. The headline was splashed across the front. "Senator Reeves under fire for Apex ties." She laid the paper on his desk, smiling like a cat who had cornered a mouse. "You see? They're pushing you. If you vote the right way, the story dies. If you don't." She let the thought hang, her eyes glittering. Daniel's pulse quickened. This isn't just one vote, is it? Clara leaned closer, lowering her voice. It's never just one vote. But the sooner you accept that, the easier this gets. Her perfume curled around him, intoxicating and suffocating all at once. He realized then that he wasn't just in bed with Clara, he was in bed with Apex, with Ethan, with the very machinery of corruption he'd once sworn to fight. And the walls were closing in. Margaret Reeves had never been the kind of woman to scream, to throw dishes, or to stage public meltdowns. Her power was in silence, in the way she carried herself with dignity, even when her husband faltered. But silence was also dangerous, and Daniel had been married long enough to recognize when it turned lethal. That evening, while Daniel drowned himself in committee notes at his office, Margaret sat in her bedroom with a private investigator across from her. The man was lean, forgettable, the sort of figure you could pass on the street 100 times and never remember. His briefcase snapped open with quiet efficiency. Inside, photographs. Grainy, but clear enough. Daniel, entering the Georgetown Hotel. Daniel, with Clara's hand brushing his arm. Daniel, his tie loosened, his face lit with something Margaret hadn't seen in years, desire. Her throat tightened, but she forced herself to stay calm. Can you get me more? The investigator nodded. If you want the whole story, yes, but it'll cost. Get it, Margaret said, her voice steady as stone. And don't stop until I know everything. The next morning, Daniel arrived at the Capitol to chaos. Reporters swarmed the marble steps, shouting questions that pierced through the noise like arrows. Senator, are the rumors true about your relationship with Clara Vaughn? Have you accepted donations tied to Apex Technologies? Do you plan to resign if the allegations are confirmed? He kept his head down, jaw clenched, bodyguards carving a path through the mob. But the headlines screamed louder than the voices. Every screen in the lobby blared the same story. Leaked photos suggest Reeves tied to Apex Lobbyist. The images weren't explicit, just blurred stills of him and Clara leaving the hotel, her hand grazing his sleeve. But they didn't need to be. The suggestion alone was poison. Inside his office, Jenna slammed the door shut and shoved a stack of tabloids onto his desk. They're everywhere, Daniel. Every outlet has them. I need you to tell me right now if this is real. His throat felt dry. They're fabrications. Angles, tricks of light. Don't lie to me. Jenna's eyes burned. I can't save you if you lie to me. Daniel gripped the desk, knuckles white. He thought of Margaret, of the investigator she didn't know he knew about, already circling him like a hawk. Of Clara, waiting in the wings, whispering that one vote could make it all vanish. But the press didn't wait. The phone on his desk rang and rang, the red light blinking like a siren. A cable network wanted him on air. A late-night host was already making jokes at his expense. His colleagues whispered in the corridors, their glances heavy with judgment. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. By noon he was standing in front of a podium, lights glaring, the press corps buzzing like a hive. His palms were slick with sweat. The cameras went live. Senator Reeves, one reporter shouted, do you deny the allegations of an inappropriate relationship with Clara Vaughn? Daniel opened his mouth. The words tangled in his throat. Every answer seemed like a noose. Deny, and the truth would hang him later. Admit, and it was over now. From the second row, a familiar face caught his eye. Margaret, standing silently among the press, her expression unreadable. The ground tilted beneath him, and then the cameras zoomed closer, the air thick with anticipation, waiting for his next word. The word that could decide his fate. The press conference was a disaster. Daniel had stumbled through denials, half-truths, and deflections, his voice cracking under the heat of the cameras. By the time he stepped down from the podium, his approval rating had already begun to hemorrhage in real time across the news networks. Back in his office, silence pressed in like a vice. The blinds were drawn, the phones muted. Daniel sat alone in the dark, staring at his reflection in the window. A man unraveling. The phone in his pocket buzzed. One word lit the screen. Next. He felt his stomach knot. He didn't want to open it, but his thumb betrayed him. The message unfurled like a blade. Subsidy was step 1. Step 2. Defense contract vote pending Friday. You'll support it. Or the next batch of photos hits the press. Attached were new images. Daniel's blood ran cold. These weren't the blurred hotel entrance shots. These were sharper, closer. Him and Clara in the suite. His tie undone. Her lips grazing his neck. Irrefutable. He staggered to his desk, gripping the edge until his knuckles turned white. Whoever was behind this hadn't just gotten lucky with one photograph. They had been inside the room, watching, recording. By the time Clara arrived, Daniel was pacing like a caged animal. She shut the door behind her and leaned against it, her eyes flicking to the phone in his hand. "They sent more?" she asked, almost too calmly. He rounded on her. "How the hell do they have pictures from inside the hotel room? Who knew? Who?" Clara didn't flinch. "Calm down." "Don't tell me to calm down. This isn't blackmail anymore, it's surveillance. They were in the room, Clara. In the goddamn room." She moved closer, her expression unreadable. "Then we play smarter. They want the defense contract pushed through? Do it. Once they get what they want, this ends." Daniel stared at her, something snapping in the back of his mind. "You knew, didn't you?" Her eyes narrowed. "Knew what?" "That this wasn't just some opportunist with a camera. This is bigger. Organized. And you've been steering me the whole way. Just one vote, just one sacrifice. Was this your plan all along?" Clara's lips curved, not in a smile but in something sharper. "You're giving me too much credit." He didn't believe her. Couldn't. Every glance, every whisper from her now looked like strategy. He thought of Ethan in the garage, so smug, so sure. He thought of Clara telling him that everyone wears chains in Washington. The room felt smaller. "You don't get it, do you?" Daniel muttered. "This doesn't stop. It never stops. First subsidies, now defense. Next week it'll be foreign policy or intelligence. And every time, it's my face they'll drag across the front page." Clara reached for his arm, but he pulled away. "Darling," she said softly, almost soothingly. "You're too valuable to waste on panic. Play the game. Survive. That's all anyone does in this city." Her words slithered through him, a mixture of comfort and poison. He wanted to push her away, to scream, but part of him knew she was right. He couldn't fight this. Not yet. That night, Margaret sat alone in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone. The photos had reached her too. Anonymous email. No subject line. Just the images. She didn't cry. She didn't throw the phone. She simply stared, her jaw tightening, and whispered to herself, "It's worse than I thought." And in that quiet vow, Daniel's enemies multiplied. Daniel Reeves barely recognized the man staring back at him in the mirror. The once unshakable senator, the man who thundered about integrity and family values, now stood hollow-eyed, jaw clenched, tie knotted too tightly around his throat. The phone on the counter buzzed again. Ethan's latest demand, cold and direct. "Friday. Defense contract. Don't fail." Daniel slammed the phone down, his pulse pounding. He needed air, needed distance, needed... The bedroom door opened behind him. Margaret stood in the frame, her expression calm but lethal. She held a manila envelope in one hand. "I know," she said. Daniel froze. "Margaret, don't." Her voice cut like a blade. She stepped forward, laying the envelope on the dresser. Inside were photographs, the investigator's work. Each one worse than the last. Daniel and Clara in the hotel. Daniel and Clara leaving dinners. Daniel's hand on Clara's back, unmistakable. "I wanted to believe you," Margaret said softly. "God help me, I wanted to. But you've humiliated me. Humiliated this family. And now the entire city smells blood." Daniel tried to speak, but his throat closed. He could only whisper, "It's not what it looks like." Margaret's laugh was bitter. "Don't insult me. The only question now is whether I bury you myself or let the press finish the job." He stepped toward her. "Please, Margaret. If this comes out..." Her eyes blazed. It's already out. The only thing left is how you fall. She turned and walked out, leaving the photographs scattered like landmines across the dresser. Later that night, Clara met him in his Senate office. She wore black, her hair pinned back, every detail of her appearance sharp and deliberate. She closed the door and leaned against it, eyes flicking to the chaos of papers on his desk. She knows, Daniel muttered. Margaret. She hired someone. She has everything. Clara tilted her head. Then it's time to make a choice. Daniel looked up, exhausted, furious. What choice? I'm finished. The press has the photos. Margaret has the photos. Ethan is pulling my strings like a puppet. It's over. Clara crossed the room, her heels clicking like a metronome. She placed her hands flat on his desk, leaning close until he could feel the warmth of her breath. No, darling. It's just beginning. He stared at her, lost. What are you talking about? Her smile was razor-thin. Stay with me. Break with Margaret, with your so-called allies, with the lies you keep telling yourself. Forget about saving face. You've already lost it. But power? Power is still on the table. With me, with Apex, with the people who actually run this city. Daniel recoiled. You're asking me to burn my life down. I'm asking you to choose survival over pride. If you stand with me, you can still control the board. If you cling to the wreckage of your marriage, your career, your reputation, you'll drown. Her eyes locked on his, steady and unflinching. So, who do you belong to, Daniel? The wife who will destroy you? Or the woman who can save you? The silence between them stretched, heavy as lead. Finally, Daniel exhaled, his voice a whisper. Set up a meeting with Ethan. One last meeting. If I'm going to survive this, I need to know who's really pulling the strings. Clara's lips curved in triumph. Now you're starting to understand. The cafe was too ordinary for the stakes at hand. A family-owned place near Union Station, all chipped mugs and the smell of burnt coffee. Daniel sat in the corner booth, a plain gray suit making him blend in among the commuters. His hands shook as he stirred sugar into a coffee he had no intention of drinking. Across from him, Ethan slid into the booth, every bit as confident as the first night in the garage. He didn't bother with pleasantries. You have until Friday, Ethan said flatly. Defense contract passes, or the next batch drops. Daniel leaned back, forcing calm into his voice. And then what? You keep bleeding me, one vote at a time, until I have nothing left? How long do you think I'll keep rolling over? Ethan's smirk was almost pitying. As long as we want. But Daniel wasn't shaking because he was afraid. Not this time. Beneath the table, a wire taped to his chest transmitted every word to a surveillance van parked 2 blocks away. The FBI had been reluctant at first. Blackmail was one thing. But when national defense contracts came into play, it became treason. Daniel's only chance was to catch Ethan admitting it. He pressed. Who's we, Ethan? Who's giving the orders? Clara? Ethan's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. He leaned in, voice low. You don't get it, Senator. Clara isn't the messenger. Clara's the architect. You think she stumbled into your bed by accident? Daniel's blood went cold. She chose you, Ethan continued. Hand-picked you. Groomed you. Every late-night drink, every whispered word, hers. You've been hers since day one. Daniel's mouth went dry. You're lying. Am I? Ethan leaned back, his smile widening. Ask yourself who benefits most if you fall. Not me. Not even Apex. Clara. She's not just pulling strings. She's rewriting the whole damn playbook. Daniel's heart hammered. For a moment he forgot about the wire, the agents listening in, the sting operation he'd pinned his last hopes on. And that's when Clara walked through the door. She didn't look at Ethan. She didn't look at Daniel. She walked straight to the counter, ordered tea, and took a table near the window as if she were just another customer. But when her eyes finally lifted, locking on Daniel, her expression told him everything. She knew. She knew about the wire. Ethan chuckled, sliding out of the booth. Looks like your mistress just saved me the trouble. Good luck, Senator. By the time the FBI moved in, Ethan was already gone, slipping into the crowd. Clara stayed seated, calm as ever, sipping her tea while Daniel was dragged into the street by two agents who hissed into his ear. The recording's compromised, we got nothing. And Clara just watched. As Daniel was shoved into the waiting car, their eyes met through the cafe window. She raised her cup in a mock toast. The message was clear. Checkmate. Daniel Reeves had lost everything. By morning, the story had spread across every network, every paper, every tablet screen in the nation. The photos, the blackmail, the whispers of corporate influence. Even without Ethan's continued interference, the narrative had taken on a life of its own, and Daniel was at the center of a storm he could no longer control. Margaret had filed for divorce. Their home was sold. The children were sent to stay with relatives. Daniel's office, once a command center of power, felt like a mausoleum of his former life. He could have resigned quietly, slinked into obscurity, faded from memory. But sitting in the dim light of his apartment, nursing a whiskey that tasted like ash, Daniel realized he wasn't finished. Clara Vaughn had survived unscathed. In fact, she had thrived. Rumor had it she had already begun working for a rising senator in another state, untouchable and untarnished, leaving a trail of political casualties behind her. And Daniel? He was the main exhibit. For days, he wrestled with anger, fear, and humiliation. But somewhere beneath it all burned a single cold thought. If he couldn't reclaim his career, he could at least take down the woman who had orchestrated its destruction. He began gathering evidence. Confidential emails, insider notes, recorded conversations. Every misstep Clara had made, every directive she had sent, every manipulation she had engineered. He compiled it all. It took weeks. Care, patience, stealth. And then, finally, the perfect moment. A press conference. Clara was set to announce a major legislative initiative on behalf of her new client. The media would be there. Cameras, reporters, live streams, a stage. Daniel arrived early, alone, carrying a folder heavier than any he'd ever held. When the moment came, he handed it to a trusted reporter and quietly explained what it contained. Incontrovertible proof of Clara's manipulation, blackmail schemes, and orchestration of political corruption. The fallout was instantaneous. Headlines changed in real time. Clara's ascent screeched to a halt as investigators pounced, and the very people she had used as pawns now turned their eyes toward her. But even in victory, Daniel didn't feel relief. The betrayal, the affair, the exposure, it had cost him everything. His marriage, his career, his reputation. As the press swarmed around Clara's sudden downfall, Daniel walked away. He had burned bridges, toppled empires, and exposed the truth. But he knew the city would heal, the power would shift, and the cycle would begin again. He was just another casualty of a world built on secrets and ambition. Outside, the sun rose over the Capitol, indifferent to the wreckage below. Daniel paused, looking at the horizon. He whispered to himself, almost a promise. If I couldn't save myself, at least I could burn down the empire that destroyed me. And with that, he disappeared into the streets, leaving the city to its scandals, its lies, and its hunger for power.